An old friend, James, called me up and asked if I'd like to join him in the city. I hadn't seen him since I rescued him from the lair of the Fervent One, and on the phone he sounded a bit strange. He had a small basement condo downtown. I spent a few hours in traffic getting there. The landscaping in front of the building was nice, modern, hanging gardens. I made my way into the building, and then into the basement, and knocked on James's door. There was no response, and I checked my phone. I was 5 minutes late, actually. Over the phone, he'd sounded sort of panicked, like there was something he needed to show me or tell me. "James?" I knocked again, my blood pressure rising. I put my hand on the knob and turned, and to my surprise, the door creaked open. It was dark inside, and dusty. It was hard to believe anyone had set foot in here for a year, let alone lived there. I ventured deeper into the abode, shutting the door behind me. I moved through the dusty kitchen, stepping carefully over toppled chairs. My eyes were adjusting to the darkness, and I could see writing on the walls. It looked familiar. There were runes similar to the ones we'd seen on the rogue planet's surface. Oh, James. I was worried. It seemed he had gone crooked after his close encounter with the Fervent One, but I still couldn't see him. "James, where are you?" I called tentatively into the dark, then crossed over into the carpeted living room. There was even more writing on the walls the deeper I went. My heart beat a little harder. He definitely told me to come to his condo, but why wasn't he greeting me? I heard a noise at the back of the living room and down a short hall. If memory served correctly, I think that was the laundry room. I crept over to it and pushed the door open slowly. James was there, crouched over with a piece of chalk in his hand, scrawling fresh runes onto the wall by the light of a single window. "James, what are you doing? Are you okay?" He turned around with a glazed look in his eye and a grin. I'd seen that look before, when he was possessed by the Fervent One, but just as I braced to fight or flee, he seemed to snap out of it. "Nick, oh good, you're here. We need to get to Venus." "Venus? Yeah, did you bring your ship?" "My ship? No, it's in the bay next to my house. Why would I bring it here? There's no room for it." James got up and brushed past me as he made his way swiftly to the front door. "Why do you want to go to Venus?" I called after him. "I'll explain on the way. Let's go." After 3 more hours in traffic and half an hour getting into orbit, we were on our way to Earth's nearest neighbor. James was twiddling his hands nervously and looking around, muttering something to himself. "So are you going to tell me what this is about?" I asked, finally establishing the autopilot. "I have to admit, James, I'm kind of worried about you. You don't seem like yourself ever since, That's because I'm not myself. Buddy, you're scaring me." While I was in hibernation on that frozen planet, my mind was active. All of our minds were. We were connected to the Fervent One, but also to each other. "Who's we?" I asked. "Every sentient creature it preys upon. Through the runes it draws, the Fervent One connects to a deeper part of the subconscious, something common to all organisms with a brain. I doubt any human science understands it yet, but as we appeared to be lying there sleeping, every single alien in stasis was sharing information with each other, although I don't think it was intentional. Did you know Venus used to be an Earth-like planet?" "Yeah, I've heard that hypothesis before." "It's not a hypothesis. You see, that wasn't the first time the rogue planet passed through our solar system. The first time it passed by was about 730 million years ago." "What? How? Doesn't it just float in a straight line?" "Well, I guess the planet must have slingshotted around a star at some point. But that's not the important part. One of the aliens the Fervent One captured was a resident of Venus 730 million years ago. Their civilization was quite advanced. They were primate-like, and I suspect human life on Earth is derived from their civilization through some mechanism or another. This ancient creature, possibly a father of our species, lay there on the shelf in stasis next to me, also prey of the Fervent One. And during that time I saw his entire life's memories, although I wasn't able to remember them until yesterday. Those runes I draw on my walls, they help me remember the neural connections I made. This alien's name was Uda. By no means was he an elite in Venetian society, but everyday items to them would be artifacts of great power to us. It is one such artifact that I mean to collect. The object is a 4-sided triangular prism. Just before Auto was captured by the Fervent One, he left it behind in his dwelling. I suspect it remains there to this day, at a place called Sedna Planitia, on the southern coast of the Ishtar continent. The hull of your ship, it can handle 500 degrees Celsius, right? It's supposed to be able to, but I've never tested it out before. But even if we go to the surface of Venus, you're not going to be able to leave the ship. It rains sulfuric acid on Venus. Only in the atmosphere, James corrected me. I noticed you had quite nice space suits. I think that I'll be able to survive at least 5 minutes in one of those. You're nuts, man, I don't know what to tell you. But I couldn't hide the smirk on my face. If what he was saying was true, this would be one of the coolest discoveries ever made, and I meant to help him see it through. As we arrived at the planet, I wasted no time pulling into orbit, and instead plunged into the atmosphere. Even through the thick hull, we could feel the heat immediately, and the furious thick clouds and pink lightning shut down the climate control systems inside. It was a bumpy ride, but I was laughing to myself. The insulation was holding. We would be fine. With James and the computer's help, we navigated and made our way to Sedna Planitia and landed onto a patch of rock under the yellow storm, which, to our luck, by Venetian standards, was relatively calm at that moment. As I peered out the front windshield through the thick haze of atmosphere, I did think I could see ruins, old, dilapidated structures that had the color of rock, but that naturally must have been a much more sturdy material. Is this the right place? I asked. James's eyes rolled back in his head for a moment, and a grin crept across his face. When his eyes returned, they were looking in different directions, and every which way like a chameleon, as if tracing invisible runes. Oh, we're here all right, Nick. I felt uneasy, but he seemed to have everything under control. He snapped out of his trance and donned a spacesuit. Are you sure you know where you're going? Absolutely. 100%. Alright, I can hear you over the radio, so holler if you need anything. I was a little more nervous again as the airlock opened, and I could see James struggling with the heat and wind. I went back to the dash to monitor his vitals and keep track of his position. He was walking toward the starboard side of the ship, and I made my way over to the kitchen window to watch him. The ruin was right there in plain view. It looked like a well, 4 pillars that came to a single point on top. It sat over a rocky outcrop with a partition just large enough to pass through. Oh, James, I hope you're not going in there, I muttered to myself as he climbed into it. It really was a tight fit, and I worried that he would damage the suit. 3 minutes passed, and James did not emerge. I went back to the dash to take a look at his vitals again. It seemed he was running a fever, 38.5 degrees Celsius. Suddenly, his voice came over the radio. Hey, Nick, I'm stuck. I need your help. Oh, shit. This is what I'd been dreading, but I didn't hesitate to put on a spacesuit myself. Adrenaline pumping through my veins as the airlock opened, and the blast of heat hit me. In a panic, I bounded over to the well-like structure. I could see his hand poking out through the gap in the rocks. I planted my feet squarely over the opening and grabbed a hold of him. With the help of my suit, I deadlifted him back up to the surface, but his suit tore as I did so, scissored between the rocks of the small opening. I could hear him screaming as the hot wind burned the patch of exposed skin on his back. He doubled over in pain, supporting himself with his right arm as his left was clutching something tight to his chest. I helped him up and got him back to the ship as swiftly as I could. The airlock shut, the inner door opened, and I hurried him into the med bay. Something rolled from his hand onto the floor, the artifact he spoke of. I helped the robotic arm remove his spacesuit and treat his burn, and gradually, his screams became laughter. Is this the artifact? Did you get it? I couldn't contain my own excitement either. That's the one, Nick. Sorry about your suit, by the way. I'll pay for another one. The fire was back in his eyes. Oh, don't worry about it, I told him. So, what does this artifact do? It's a key. To what? I asked. It programs a wormhole. connecting it to a specific one in another part of the universe. James picked up the prism and turned it in his hands. One of these keys unlocks 4 wormholes in total, one for each side. The base of the prism is our own wormhole. Our own? Yeah. I'll give you the coordinates. All patched up, James made his way back into the cockpit and typed the coordinates into the dash. There's only one wormhole in our solar system, he told me. It's here, in the asteroid belt. My hairs stood on end. I recognized that spot. It was where that man in the mirror image of my ship had stared me down. So that's what it was. The source of all that radio static. It was a wormhole. Whoever that man was must not have had a key. I explained to James that I'd been there before and what I'd seen. He looked taken aback, but he wanted to at least check it out. If the man's still there, we can turn around, he promised me. And so we went, on the same route that I'd taken to Titan a couple weeks earlier. The asteroids were a little more sparse this time, and I listened carefully for radio static and singing as we approached. But I was relieved when there was nothing. I turned off the engine, and we drifted up to the point. It didn't open on its own this time, not until James presented it with one side of the artifact. The point opened up into a strange mirror that bent the light around it. But luckily, there was no reflection in it this time. Instead, it showed a foreign patch of space. A pattern of stars that I didn't recognize. The positioning system on the dash was going haywire. "Are you ready?" James asked me excitedly. Truth be told, I wasn't. My hand was trembling as slowly I guided the ship toward the mirror, sheer wonder propelling me forward. The sheet rippled when the nose of the ship made contact with it, and as it passed over our bodies, I began to see strange things. It looked like we were moving backwards, rapidly through the asteroid field, swirling about, and yet, at the same time, it didn't feel like we were moving. In the blink of an eye, we arrived, 2 stars orbiting one another. The ship's positioning system came back online. It was the Alpha Centauri star system, the nearest solar system to our own, 4 light years away. I was breathless, at a loss for words. A whole new system to explore. But that's not all, James began, excitedly. Turn the ship around. I did as he asked, and James presented another side of the Venetian artifact to the face of the wormhole. This is the other place I saw in Oda's memories. James grinned as the mirror revealed another unfamiliar pattern of stars. We passed through the wormhole again, a little more brazenly this time, and came out in deep space. There were no stars close by, and I was confused. The ship's positioning system had nothing either. Wherever we were, it was so far from Earth that the manufacturer hadn't bothered to map it. "Just turn the ship," James giggled excitedly. I turned to the right 90 degrees, and into the front window came a view of the Andromeda Galaxy. I circled around fully. We were between Andromeda and the Milky Way, in deep space, but closer to Andromeda, 2.5 million light years from Earth. I couldn't take my eyes off it. Human eyes were never meant to see a galaxy like this in full, an uncountable mass of swirling stars. And yet, watching it, I felt uneasy, vulnerable in the vast pocket of space between here and home, floating in a tiny vessel upon infinite darkness. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that story. I'm considering that to be the end to Season 1 of this private spaceship saga. If you have a better name for it, I'd love to hear it in the comments, and I will probably change it to that in the playlist. I want to put more effort into this channel in the near future and start some longer series, as well have seasons to series, kind of like we have here. Everything on this channel has been original up until this point, but I think now I'm going to start accepting submissions for stories. I've had a few requests in the past, and that will allow me to work on my own longer form written down stuff more. But yeah, there will be more of this private spaceship stuff season 2 coming at some point in the future. I don't know when, but next week I want to try out a different series that I've been thinking about for a while. Until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.